Senior Investigator Teo paced in front of the massive viewscreen, his scaled skin reflecting the blue glow of the monitors. The unusual vessel had appeared at the edge of Galactic Concord territory just 6 hours ago, and still nobody knew what to make of it. "Magnify Sector 7, Tahoe ordered, his voice calm despite the tension in the room. The screen zoomed in on the strange ship. It was unlike anything in Concord records, angular, dark, and bristling with what appeared to be weapon systems. Most disturbing were the energy signatures radiating from its hull, suggesting propulsion technology far beyond anything the Concord had developed. Officer Juwu leaned forward, her slender fingers adjusting the scan parameters. "What is it?" she asked, the bioluminescent patterns on her skin pulsing with curiosity. Analyst Minho sat hunched at his console, all four of his eyes blinking rapidly as data scrolled across his screen. "Unknown classification. Heavily armed. Using propulsion we've never documented," he replied. His upper hands typed commands while his lower hands sorted through reference materials. "It's holding position at the border," Juwu noted. "Not advancing, not retreating." Tahoe nodded, a deliberate gesture. "They want us to notice them." As if responding to his words, the communications console chimed. Minho's eyes widened. "They're sending a message. Audio and visual." "Put it on screen," Tahoe ordered. The face that appeared startled everyone in the command center. The being had only 2 eyes, no apparent scales or plates, and pink-beige skin covered in patches by some kind of fabric. It spoke in a calm, measured tone. "This is Captain Elena Wright of the United Earth ship Indomitable. We come in peace as representatives of humanity, seeking diplomatic relations with the Galactic Concord. We await your response." The message ended, leaving the command center in silence. "Humans," Subin whispered from her cultural analysis station. "I've only read theoretical xenobiology papers about them. Never thought I'd see one." Security Director Doyun entered the command center, his heavy footsteps echoing on the metallic floor. His protective exoskeleton gleamed under the lights as he approached Tahoe. "Report," he demanded. Tahoe straightened his posture. "Sir, an unidentified vessel has positioned itself at our border. They call themselves humans. Their ship is the UES Indomitable. They claim to be on a diplomatic mission." Doyun studied the frozen image of the human captain. "What do we know about humans?" Subin stepped forward, her delicate wings fluttering nervously. "Very little, sir. They've never contacted any Concord species before. According to our limited data, they evolved on a high-gravity world with significant radiation. Their biology is unusual." Doyun grunted. "And this ship? Your assessment?" Minho displayed the scan results. "It's a warship, sir. No question. The weapons systems alone could devastate a small planet. The hull is reinforced against energy weapons we don't even possess, but they're making no aggressive moves." For hours, the Concord leadership debated their response. Some advocated for immediate defensive measures, others for cautious diplomacy. Tahoe watched as arguments flew back and forth, all while the human ship waited patiently at the border. Finally, Doyun silenced the debate with a raised hand. "Send an inspection team," he declared. "We need to assess this potential threat up close." Tahoe felt his heart skip a beat. "Sir, with respect, we know almost nothing about these humans or their intentions." Doyun's eyes narrowed, "Which is precisely why we need to learn more." "You will lead the team, Investigator Tahoe." "Yes, sir," Tahoe replied, recognizing the finality in Doyun's tone. In the preparation chamber, Tahoe met with his assembled team. Biologist Jimin adjusted her atmospheric sensors, her nimble fingers moving with practiced ease. Security Officer Hyun checked his defensive equipment for the 3rd time, his armored plates shifting with each movement. Cultural expert Subin reviewed her translation devices, while technology analyst Chuno calibrated his scanning tools. "This mission is unprecedented," Tahoe told them. "We'll be the first Concord citizens to make direct contact with humans. Our objective is simple: Assess the threat level, gather information about their technology and biology, and determine their true intentions. The atmospheric composition on their ship might be toxic to us, Jimin warned. My data suggests humans breathe nitrogen-oxygen mixtures at pressures that could damage our respiratory systems. Hyun nodded grimly. And their gravity settings will likely be uncomfortable. We should prepare for physical strain. Their language patterns have been partially decoded, Subin added, but cultural nuances remain completely unknown. We must be careful not to inadvertently provoke them. Chuno held up a small device. I've modified our scanners to work covertly. We can gather technical data without being obvious about it. Taiho appreciated their thoroughness. Remember, this is a diplomatic mission. We represent the Concord. No matter what we find aboard that ship, we maintain professional composure. As they boarded their shuttle, Tahoe felt a strange sensation in his gut. The humans had agreed to the inspection with surprising ease. Either they had nothing to hide, or they were very confident in their position. The journey to the human ship was short but tense. As they approached, the true scale of the UES Indomitable became clear. It dwarfed their shuttle, stretching for what seemed like kilometers. Look at the weapon emplacements, Hyun whispered. I count at least 50 major hardpoints, and those are just the obvious ones. Junho's instruments beeped continuously. The energy output is, I don't have a comparison. It's beyond anything in our database. Their shuttle received docking instructions and slowly approached an opening in the massive hull. As they passed into the ship's interior, artificial gravity took hold, immediately heavier than what they were accustomed to. Gravity at 1.2 times our standard, Jimin reported, already breathing harder. Atmosphere pressure high, but within tolerance. The docking bay was occupied by several smaller craft and what appeared to be maintenance crews. The humans moved with an unsettling quickness despite their seemingly simple bipedal structure. As the shuttle doors opened, Tahoe led his team out. The higher gravity made each step an effort, but they had trained for this. Waiting for them was a group of humans in matching dark uniforms. One stepped forward, making a gesture with her hand. Welcome aboard the Indomitable. I'm Lieutenant Commander Park, your liaison during your inspection. Tahoe tried not to stare at the human's alien features, the flat face, the small nose, the strange hair covering part of her head. Most disturbing was how fragile she appeared, with no visible armor or protective features. Thank you for your welcome, Tahoe replied through his translator. We are honored to be the first delegation from the Galactic Concord to meet humanity. As they followed Lieutenant Commander Park deeper into the ship, none of them realized they were about to discover why humans were considered the galaxy's most dangerous species. They had evolved on a world that should have killed them, and instead had made them nearly impossible to kill. Lieutenant Commander Park walked with a smooth, effortless stride despite the ship's heavy gravity. Taiho and his team struggled to keep pace, their bodies already feeling the strain. Welcome aboard, Park said, gesturing to the corridor ahead. We've prepared a tour route that will show you our ship's main areas without compromising security. Taiho noted how the human moved. She seemed small for what was clearly a predator species, but every movement was precise and efficient. No wasted energy, no hesitation. His security training recognized the signs of a dangerous opponent. We appreciate your openness, Taiho replied, trying to match her pace. Our goal is simply to understand your species better. Park nodded. Of course. First stop is our main crew deck. You'll be able to observe our people going about their daily routines. The corridor opened into a large open area where dozens of humans moved about their tasks. Some sat at control stations, others carried equipment, and a few gathered around tables consuming food. Jimin activated her scanner discreetly. Their internal temperature is remarkably high, she whispered to Taiho. Almost hot enough to damage proteins in our species. Subin was studying their interactions. They maintain minimal personal space compared to Concord norms. Notice how they touch casually. Most of our member species would find it threatening. Their observations were interrupted when Park guided them toward another section. This is one of our recreational facilities. Crew morale is important on long voyages. The doors slid open to reveal what Tahoe immediately recognized as some kind of training facility. Humans were engaged in various physical activities, and the sight made the inspection team freeze in collective shock. In one corner, a human lifted a metal bar loaded with weights. Shunho's scanner beeped urgently. That's over 300 kilos, he muttered in disbelief. The gravity here is already higher than our homeworld, and they're adding hundreds of kilos of resistance for fun. Nearby, other humans were engaged in what appeared to be combat. They struck padded targets with their limbs, the impacts echoing through the room. Others grappled with each other on mats, techniques that Hyun recognized as designed to incapacitate opponents. "What is the purpose of this activity?" Tahoe asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Park looked confused by the question. "Exercise. Recreation. Some crew members enjoy martial arts as a hobby. It helps with stress relief." "This is recreation," Hyun whispered, his protective scales flattening against his body. An involuntary defensive response. These activities would qualify as elite military training for most Concord species. They watched as a human female half the size of her opponent flipped him over her shoulder. The larger human hit the ground with a thud that made Jimin flinch, but both humans laughed afterward. Their bones should have fractured from that impact, Jimin noted, checking her scanner. Their skeletal structure must be significantly denser than it appears. Park led them to another area where humans sat at tables, drinking from containers. "Our mess hall. Would you like to observe our nutrition intake?" The team approached cautiously. Jimin activated her chemical analyzer as a human sipped from a steaming cup. "They consumed this voluntarily?" she asked, studying the readout. "This beverage, coffee," Park supplied helpfully. "It contains stimulants that would kill 3 of our member species," Hyun noted, watching humans casually drink the dark liquid. "And they appear to enjoy it." A human nearby was eating something that Jimin's scanner identified as containing capsaicin, a defense chemical produced by plants to prevent consumption. "They eat things specifically because they cause pain," Subin whispered. "The cultural implications are concerning." Park noticed their interest. "Would you like to try some? We can adjust preparation methods for your physiology." "That won't be necessary," Tahoe responded quickly. He'd seen enough to know that human consumption habits were potentially lethal to his team. Their tour continued through engineering sections, medical facilities, and science labs. At each stop, the team documented more alarming observations about human capabilities and tolerances. In the medical bay, Jimin nearly lost her professional composure. "Your medical records indicate that you can function with up to 40% blood loss," she asked the ship's doctor. The doctor nodded casually. "It's not ideal, but yes, humans can remain conscious and mobile with significant blood loss. Our bodies compensate by narrowing blood vessels and increasing heart rate." "And these?" Hyun pointed to a cabinet of medications. "Pain suppressants," the doctor explained, "for when crew members need to continue working despite injuries." The most disturbing part of the tour came when Park led them to observe what she called a standard marine readiness drill. They stood on an observation deck as a compartment below was suddenly filled with simulated smoke. Alarms blared as Marines rushed into the hostile environment. The speed, coordination, and sheer physical power displayed made even veteran security officer Hyun nervous. The humans moved through obstacles, communicated in short bursts, and simulated neutralizing threats with practiced precision. One Marine was injured during the exercise. His teammates applied emergency medical treatment while continuing their mission without hesitation. The injured Marine, despite a simulated severe wound, continued to function and assist. "Are all human vessels this combat ready?" Tahoe asked their guide, no longer able to hide his concern. Lieutenant Commander Park laughed. "The Indomitable. This is just a diplomatic escort. You should see our actual warships. The casual statement sent a chill through the inspection team. Later, as they gathered in private quarters assigned to them, the team compared notes. Their physical capabilities exceed our estimates by at least 200%. Junho reported. They can exert force, endure damage, and function in environments that would incapacitate or kill most known species. Jimin nodded. Their biology is terrifying. They intentionally ingest toxins that their bodies have adapted to process. They expose themselves to radiation levels we consider dangerous just to maintain vitamin production. Their immune system attacks foreign bodies so aggressively that they rarely need medical intervention for infections. Their recreation is indistinguishable from combat training, Hyun added. Even their children's games, based on their cultural database, involve competition, physical contact, and simulated warfare. Subin had been unusually quiet. I've been studying their historical texts, she finally said. For most of their history, they fought each other. Not just occasional conflicts like most evolving species, but constant, planet-wide warfare using increasingly destructive weapons. They nearly destroyed themselves multiple times. And now they've unified, Tahoe concluded. All that evolutionary pressure, all that conflict adaptation, turned outward instead of inward. There's something else, Juno said. I managed to get basic specifications for this vessel. The Indomitable isn't classified as a warship in their fleet. It's listed as a diplomatic escort vessel with limited defensive capabilities. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. We need to recommend immediate peaceful relations, Tahoe said firmly. These humans don't seem aggressive by nature, but they are built for war in ways we can barely comprehend. The Concorde cannot risk conflict with such a species. As Tahoe prepared his preliminary report, he couldn't shake the memory of humans casually lifting weights that could crush his species, drinking poisons for pleasure, and treating combat as recreation. The Galactic Concorde had encountered many species over its long history, but humans were something entirely new and entirely dangerous. The inspection team followed Lieutenant Commander Park down a narrow corridor toward the ship's command center. After 2 days aboard the human vessel, Tahoe had gathered enough evidence to make his preliminary report to the Concorde. The humans were unlike any species they had encountered, strong, resilient, and adapted to conditions that would kill most Concorde species. Your captain has agreed to answer some final questions, Park explained as they walked. Then we'll return you to your shuttle. Jimin looked relieved. The constant high gravity had been taking a toll on all of them. Hyun moved with the stiffness that came from overtaxed muscles, while Chuno had developed a slight limp. Only Subin seemed relatively comfortable, her lighter frame better suited to the conditions. They were passing through a junction when the lights suddenly changed from white to pulsing red. A loud, repeating tone echoed through the corridors. Hull breach in Section 7, announced the ship's communication system. Radiation leak detected. All personnel implement emergency protocols. This is not a drill. Park's demeanor transformed instantly. The polite liaison disappeared, replaced by something Tahoe could only describe as a predator. Her posture straightened, her eyes scanned rapidly, and her voice took on a sharp, commanding tone. "Follow me," she ordered, already moving at a pace the inspection team struggled to match. She pressed her hand to a communication panel on the wall. Park to command. I have the inspection team in Junction 4B, proceeding to Safety Zone 3. The response came immediately. Negative, Lieutenant Commander. Safety Zone 3 is compromised. Reroute to medical. Park changed direction without hesitation, leading them down a different corridor. The ship had become a hive of activity, with humans rushing purposefully in all directions. None showed panic, only focused determination. "What's happening?" Tahoe asked, struggling to keep up. "Unknown," Park replied tersely. "Stay close." They turned a corner and found their path blocked by a sealed emergency door. Park accessed a nearby terminal, her fingers flying across the interface. The door remained sealed. "Command, "We're cut off at Junction 4D, she reported, requesting alternate route. "All routes to medical from your position are compromised," came the response. "Hold position. Rescue team en route." Park turned to the inspection team. "We stay here. Help is coming." The corridor began to fill with smoke, and temperature sensors on Jimin's equipment began to flash warnings. Something was burning nearby. The minutes that followed gave Tahoe his first glimpse of humans in crisis. Through a viewport in the corridor, they could see into Section 7 where the breach had occurred. What Tahoe witnessed would haunt his nightmares for years to come. Humans in partial protective gear entered chambers flooded with radiation levels that Jimin's sensors indicated were immediately lethal. They moved with purpose, sealing breaches, operating equipment, and carrying injured comrades. "They can't survive that," Jimin whispered in horror. "The radiation levels are." Her voice trailed off as they watched a human engineer work on exposed circuitry, while alarms indicated the room was losing atmosphere. The human wore only a simple breathing apparatus, no full protective suit, no radiation shielding. "Why aren't they waiting for proper equipment?" Subin asked, her voice shaking. Park's response was chillingly matter-of-fact. "There's no time. If they don't seal that breach, the radiation will spread to populated sections." "But they'll die," Hyun said. Park shook her head. "Humans can withstand short exposures to radiation and vacuum. They'll suffer damage, but our medical technology can repair most of it." As they watched, the humans in Section 7 completed their tasks. The radiation warnings changed from red to yellow on the displays. The breach had been contained, but at what cost? Suddenly, the structure around them groaned. The damage was spreading. "Move," Park shouted, pushing the inspection team forward as the ceiling behind them collapsed. They ran through smoke-filled corridors, the humans moving with impossible speed despite the conditions. Tahoe felt his lungs burning from the toxic smoke, but the humans seemed barely affected. The chaos separated them. Tahoe found himself with Jimin and Hyun, while Subin and Junho were ahead with Park. As they rounded a corner, they heard a terrible sound, metal giving way under pressure. "Look out!" shouted a human voice. Tahoe watched in horror as a massive structural beam broke loose directly above Junho. There was no time to react, no time to run. Junho froze, his eyes wide with the certainty of death. What happened next defied everything Tahoe thought he knew about biological limitations. A human female. Petty Officer Kim, according to her uniform, launched herself toward Junho. She positioned herself under the falling beam and caught it with her body, her legs braced against the floor, her arms stretched upward. The impact should have killed her instantly. The beam's weight would crush most Concord species to paste. But Kim held it, her body trembling with the effort, giving Junho precious seconds to scramble to safety. "Go," she shouted through gritted teeth, blood trickling from her mouth. "Just a broken rib or two. I've had worse in training." Junho stumbled away just as more humans arrived. They worked together to secure the beam while a medical officer examined Kim. 3 broken ribs, punctured lung, possible internal bleeding, the medic announced after scanning her. "Can I return to duty?" Kim asked, trying to stand. The medic pushed her back down. "Negative. Medical bay for you." Later, when the emergency was contained, Tahoe learned the truth. The accident had been deliberate sabotage. Extremist elements within the Concord, who believed humans were too dangerous to ally with, had planted devices on the hull during routine maintenance of the docking bay. They had intended to force the human ship to retreat, ending diplomatic efforts before they could begin. In the safety of temporary quarters, Tahoe's team gathered to process what they had witnessed. They entered lethal radiation zones. Jimin said, her voice hollow, "Without proper protection, voluntarily." "I saw a human working in vacuum with only a breathing mask," Hyun added. "No pressure suit." The blood vessels in his exposed skin were rupturing, and he kept working. Subin had been unusually quiet. Petty Officer Kim, she finally said. The beam she caught weighed at least 600 kilograms. I checked the ship's materials database. No Concorde species could have survived that impact, let alone remained conscious enough to speak. Juno hadn't spoken since his rescue. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his hands. She saved my life, he said finally, without hesitation, without even knowing me. Tahoe nodded slowly. We've misjudged them. Yes, they're physically capable of terrible violence. Their bodies are adapted to survive conditions that would kill us instantly, but they use that strength to protect others. On the medical deck, Tahoe requested permission to visit Petty Officer Kim. He found her already sitting up in bed, arguing with a doctor about when she could return to duty. Officer Kim, Tahoe said formally, I came to express our gratitude for saving Juno's life. Kim looked embarrassed by the attention. Just did what anyone would do. No, Tahoe said firmly. What you did was impossible by our standards. You risked your life for a stranger, for an alien. Kim shrugged, then winced at the movement. That's what humans do. We protect our own. And right now, you're our guests, which makes you our own. As Tahoe left the medical bay, he realized his report to the Concorde would need significant revision. Humans weren't just physically dangerous. They were dangerous because they combined their incredible physical capabilities with a fierce protective instinct that extended even to other species. The Concorde had planned to approach humans with caution, fearing their potential for violence. Now Tahoe understood the truth was more complex. Humans were indeed the most dangerous species they had encountered, but not for the reasons they had feared. The corridor collapsed with a thunderous roar. Dust and debris filled the air as emergency barriers slammed into place, isolating the damaged section. When the noise subsided, Tahoe realized he and Jimin were cut off from the rest of their team. They weren't alone, however. 4 human security personnel were trapped with them. Everyone okay? Called one of the humans, activating a light on his uniform. The beam cut through the dusty air, illuminating the small space they were confined in. Tahoe checked himself and Jimin for injuries. We are unharmed, he reported. How long until rescue? The human checked a device on his wrist. Repair crews are prioritizing critical systems. Could be a few hours before they clear this section. He approached and extended his hand. Sergeant Jawan, ship security. Tahoe hesitated before carefully grasping the human's hand in the greeting ritual he had observed. The strength in those 5 fingers was alarming, but Jawan was careful not to apply too much pressure. Senior Investigator Tahoe, he replied. This is Biologist Jimin. Jawan nodded to his team. Corporals Yuna and Yuna, and Private Donghae. The humans seemed remarkably calm about their situation. They conducted a quick assessment of their confined space, checked communications, and established a small base area with supplies from their packs. Their efficiency was impressive. You're not what we expected, admitted Sergeant Jawan as they settled in to wait. Most new species either try to attack us or run away screaming. Tahoe tilted his head. Why would they react that way? The humans exchanged glances. Corporal Yuna shrugged. Our reputation tends to precede us. Stories get exaggerated. What stories? Jimin asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. Private Donghae laughed. That we eat our enemies. That we can survive being cut in half. That our children are trained as warriors from birth. Are those stories true? Tahoe asked carefully. No, of course not, Jawan said, then paused. Well, not mostly. We can't survive being cut in half. That's ridiculous. But you did willingly enter radiation zones today, Jimin pointed out. We observe humans working in conditions that would kill my species instantly. Corporal Yunha nodded. We can tolerate radiation better than most species we've encountered. Not indefinitely, but long enough to get critical jobs done. As the hours passed, an unexpected openness developed between the stranded group. The humans shared their ration packs, which Jimin carefully analyzed before confirming they were safe for Concorde biology. The simple act of sharing food seemed to relax the boundaries between them. "May I ask about your homeworld?" Tahoe ventured. "Our data is limited." The humans were surprisingly forthcoming. They described Earth, a planet of extreme environments ranging from frozen wastelands to burning deserts to deep oceans, a world of high gravity, significant radiation, and unpredictable weather patterns. "Our evolution was shaped by constant adaptation," Jawan explained. "Species that couldn't adapt quickly died out." "And you fought each other," Tahoe noted, recalling fragments of information from their cultural database. The humans grew quiet for a moment. "Yes," Yuna finally acknowledged. "For most of our history, we were divided. Tribes, nations, ideologies. We found endless reasons to fight each other." "What changed?" Jimin asked. "We nearly destroyed ourselves," Donga said simply. "Came right to the edge. That was our wake-up call." Jawan continued the story. "When we realized what we had almost done, it changed us. We unified, not overnight, but gradually. We took all that competitive drive, all that adaptive energy, and pointed it outward, toward space, toward exploration." "But you still maintain military capability," Tahoe observed. "Of course," Yuna replied. "The universe is dangerous. We learned that lesson too well to ever forget it." She accessed a nearby terminal and displayed the ship's specifications. "This isn't even a proper warship," she explained, pointing to the classification data. "The Indomitable is designated as a light patrol vessel in our fleet." Tahoe stared at the information in disbelief. The ship that had caused such alarm in the Concorde was considered a minor vessel by human standards. With permission, Jimin accessed the human medical database. Her scales paled as she scrolled through the information. "Their medical records are impossible," she whispered to Tahoe. "They can regrow limbs with minimal assistance. They intentionally expose themselves to pathogens to build immunity. They continue functioning with injuries that would incapacitate any Concorde species." Tahoe watched the humans as they worked to improve their temporary shelter. They moved with that unsettling efficiency he had noticed before. Every action purposeful, every movement economical. Evolved predators, honed by a lethal world and their own violent history. Yet they had saved Juno without hesitation. They had contained the radiation leak at great personal risk to protect others, including the Concorde visitors. "May I ask a personal question?" Tahoe said to Jawan. "Go ahead. Why did your people seek contact with the Concorde? With your capabilities, you could simply take what you want." The humans looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Why would we do that?" Jawan asked. "Violence is inefficient. Cooperation builds more than conflict destroys." "But you're built for war," Jimin said. "Your bodies, your technology, everything about you is designed to survive conflict." Yuna shook her head. "We're built to survive, period. War was just one challenge among many. We survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and yes, our own violence. But survival isn't just about being the strongest or the most aggressive. It's about adaptation," Donnie added. "And we've learned that cooperation is the ultimate adaptation. Alone, even the strongest species eventually fails. Together, even the weakest can thrive." As the conversation continued, Tahoe began to understand. The Concorde had miscalculated, not because they overestimated human capability for violence. If anything, they had underestimated it, but because they had missed the underlying principle that guided humanity. Humans weren't aggressive conquerors, they were survivors. They had evolved on a death world, nearly destroyed themselves through conflict, and emerged with both the physical capabilities of apex predators and the social cohesion of hive species. They were built to survive at all costs, and they had learned that cooperation increased survival chances. "Your saboteurs made a fundamental error," Jawan said as repair noises finally became audible through the debris. "They thought making us look dangerous would scare the Concorde away from Alliance." "Was that incorrect?" Tahoe asked. Jawan smiled. Entirely. Humans are drawn to challenge. If you had responded to our diplomatic overture with fear or hostility, some of our more aggressive factions might have pushed for a more forceful approach. But your inspection team showed courage and curiosity. You've proven you're the kind of allies we want. When rescue finally came, clearing the last of the debris, Tahoe had reached a conclusion that would form the core of his report to the Concorde. Humans were indeed the most dangerous species they had encountered, but that made them the most valuable potential allies, not enemies to be feared. I believe, he told Jimin as they were escorted to rejoin their team, that the Concorde's future may depend on understanding these humans correctly. They aren't seeking conquest. They're seeking companions and survival. Jimin nodded slowly. They terrify me, she admitted, but I would rather have them standing with us than against us. Exactly, Tahoe said, and that will be my recommendation to the Council. The Grand Chamber of the Concorde Security Council fell silent as Tahoe stepped up to the podium. The tiered seats rose around him, filled with representatives from all 37 member species. In the front row sat Director Doyun, his exoskeleton polished to a formal shine, his 4 eyes fixed on Tahoe with unwavering intensity. Tahoe had spent 2 weeks preparing this report. 2 weeks processing what he had witnessed aboard the human vessel. 2 weeks wondering if he was making the right recommendation. Honored Council, Tahoe began, his voice steadied despite his nervousness. I stand before you to deliver my findings regarding humanity and their intentions toward the Galactic Concorde. The chamber's lighting dimmed as the display screen behind Tahoe activated. Images from the UES Indomitable appeared. The massive ship, its crew, and its capabilities. As you know, our inspection team spent 7 days aboard the human vessel following the incident. During that time, we gathered extensive data on their biology, technology, culture, and military capacity. Tahoe displayed the first set of evidence, medical records and biological scans. Humans evolved on a high-gravity, high-radiation planet with extreme environmental variations. Their biology reflects these challenges. They can function in temperatures that would kill most Concorde species. They can survive radiation exposure that we consider immediately lethal. Their bones are dense enough to withstand impacts that would shatter ours. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Tahoe continued, displaying footage from the sabotage incident. This human entered a chamber with radiation levels exceeding safety protocols by 300%. He sealed a breach, repaired critical systems, and emerged with survivable injuries. The footage showed a human engineer working calmly in conditions that made several council members turn away in horror. This human worked in hard vacuum with only minimal protection for 7 minutes. According to our medical experts, no Concorde species could survive more than 30 seconds in such conditions. The next video showed Petty Officer Kim catching the falling beam to save Juno. The weight supported here would crush any known Concorde species instantly. The human suffered broken bones and internal injuries, but remained conscious and functional. Director Doyun leaned forward. These examples prove they are physically formidable. But dangerous allies are still dangerous. Tahoe nodded. I understand your concern, Director, which is why we must also consider their history and psychology. The display changed to show human historical records and cultural analysis prepared by Subin. For most of their existence, humans fought each other. They developed weapons of increasing destructive power until they nearly annihilated their own species. But they stopped. They unified. They channeled their capacity for violence into exploration and protection. Tahoe let the information sink in before continuing. They don't glorify violence as we feared. They value cooperation, protection of others, and problem-solving. During the crisis aboard their ship, not one human abandoned their post. Not one prioritized their safety over the mission. And most tellingly, they risked their lives to save alien visitors they had just met. A council member from the Vizuri Collective raised a slender appendage. But what of their military capabilities? The vessel that approached our territory showed power signatures beyond our defensive capacity. Tahoe displayed the ship classifications Yuma had shown him. The UES Indomitable is classified in their fleet as a light patrol vessel. It is not considered a warship by human standards. Yet its weapons systems exceed our most advanced battleships. Its defensive capabilities could withstand our strongest attacks. The chamber erupted in concerned voices. Director Doyun raised a hand for silence. You paint a frightening picture, Investigator Tahoe. Why then do you recommend peaceful relations with these humans? Tahoe took a deep breath. This was the moment his entire report had built toward. In conclusion, he stated to the assembled Concord Security Council, I strongly recommend immediate peaceful relations with humanity. Director Doyum leaned forward. Your report suggests they are the most dangerous species we've encountered. Precisely why we should never be their enemy. Tahoe replied. They don't seek conflict, but they excel at it beyond anything we've seen. He displayed the final evidence, recordings of humans performing emergency repairs in hard vacuum, fighting through injuries that should have been fatal, and their casual approach to environmental hazards that would kill most species. Their light patrol vessel has weapons capabilities exceeding our best battleships. Their crew consider survival in conditions we classify as unsurvivable to be simply part of their training. The council chambers fell silent. Tahoe continued more softly. But most importantly, they value the same things we do. Peace, cooperation, knowledge. They could have responded to our saboteurs with military force. Instead, they invited us deeper into their confidence. They shared their knowledge and technology freely. He displayed the final slide, the human proposal for alliance. They offer trade, cultural exchange, and mutual defense. They ask only for the same in return. I believe refusing this offer would be the greatest strategic error in Concord history. The debate raged for days after Tahoe's presentation. Some council members advocated for isolation, others for preemptive strikes against human territory. But gradually, Tahoe's evidence and reasoning swayed the majority. 3 months later, Tahoe stood in the Grand Assembly Hall as Ambassador Sungo, and the human diplomatic team finalized the Human Concord Treaty. The document represented thousands of hours of negotiation, careful wording, and mutual compromise. As Ambassador Sungo pressed his thumbprint to the document, Tahoe couldn't help but feel profound relief. The alternative, war with humans, would have been catastrophic. The human representative, a dignified older female, added her signature next to Sungo's. The assembled diplomats and officials applauded as centuries of Concord tradition welcomed a new species into their community. At the reception afterward, Tahoe was surprised to see a familiar face approaching through the crowd. Lieutenant Commander Park, he greeted her. I didn't know you were part of the diplomatic team. She smiled. Promotion, actually. Commander Park now. After what happened on the Indomitable, they thought I might have a talent for alien relations. Congratulations, Tahoe said sincerely. Your actions during the crisis were instrumental in my report's conclusions. I read your report, Park admitted. Very thorough. Though I think you make us sound more terrifying than we are. Perhaps, Tahoe acknowledged. But fear can be useful when it leads to respect. Around them, humans and Concord species mingled cautiously. There were awkward moments, a human accidentally shaking a Lyran's sensory tendrils instead of their greeting limb, a Vazic offering a food that would be toxic to humans, but the atmosphere was one of genuine curiosity and goodwill. I hope this is the beginning of a long friendship, Park said, raising her glass in a human toast gesture. Tahoe mimicked the action with his own drink. I believe it will be. As the celebration continued, Tahoe found himself thinking about the final line of his classified report, the part not shared with the General Council. The humans have a saying, make friends with the monster under the bed. We would be wise to remember it. The humans would change the Concord. Of that he had no doubt. Their technology, their biology, their perspective, all would reshape interstellar politics for centuries to come. Some feared this change, but Tahoe welcomed it. After all, as he had learned aboard the Indomitable, Humans excelled at survival, and in a galaxy filled with unknown threats, having the galaxy's most dangerous species as allies might be the greatest survival strategy of all. The end.